Go water, it's getting cold.
Want to call to order the July 11th, 2017 meeting of the Utilities Committee of Ascension Parish Government. Would everyone please stand for the invocation, and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Dear Lord, we thank you for this day. Lord, as always, we're in the middle of this hurricane season and it's getting deeper. We ask that you look over the people of Ascension Parish and take care of those and everyone in the Gulf South region. Lord, we ask that within this hot weather and this deep heat, that everyone turn to their neighbors, especially the elderly and those in need, to make sure that they're all right. We ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please note that all committee members present except Councilman Turner. There's no chair's addition. Public comment period. Anyone wishing to speak on agenda item, please check in at the podium, and I'll give you time when that agenda item comes up. We'll move on to agenda item number 5, discussion of test results of the amoeba on West Bank wastewater system. Mr. Dawson.
I think you've heard about this before. We've been saying that everything went fine on the testing. Chlorine residuals were great, so there are no indications of any amoeba. I just found out today there was a couple other parishes that had positive results. We were very fortunate, and great job to the utility group for keeping us in compliance.
Good deal. Any questions? Mr. Oliver
Just
Joseph.
a quick question, and I know I bring this up just about every council meeting. I guess I'm gonna have to request it to be on the agenda. Can we get a report of what's going on, how many hookups, how much water, I mean, some revenues and all this? I mean, we need to
Yes, sir.
find out. We have a whole water system over there, and we don't.
Yes, sir.
We really don't know nothing.
In
So-
fact, that would be a meeting I would be scheduling in the office for, I'm telling you, the chairman, vice chairman, or whoever to come into this meeting to kind of discuss some of those numbers, because we compiled it. Have a meeting with the utility group tomorrow to go over some of the things that they've done. So the goal is to get with you guys, hopefully next week, if we can schedule it, so that we can go through some details. Okay?
And just to back up what OJ said, and it's been requested before, and we're glad you're working on it, is that basically looking at this body of work and this business that we bought into,
Yes.
we're gonna look at the sustainability of it, the
Mhm.
revenue,
Mhm.
and you know, and overall O&M, and try to hit some kind of estimates on where we stand
Yes.
to basically stay in the black.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 6, status report of Hillryville Darrow CDBG wastewater project.
Yeah, I'll ask Ms. Martha to come up and give a status of it. We
Sure.
just had a bid opening, so she'll give what the
Our
request.
grants director,
request.
Ms. Martha Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Recently, we went out for bid, and they came in June the 29th. The lowest bidder was disqualified for using the wrong forms, and therefore we went to the next one. Unfortunately, they were over budget tremendously, about $1,281,000, and that was just for the base bid. So we are talking to administration, and I think with Carl as the project manager, Mr. Dawson, we're going to recommend that we reject these bids and go back to the table and see, there could be some things, and then we'll see where the bids come out the second time, and then we'll have to make an adjustment.
And I'm gonna tell you what, I think we've ran into this before, several years back. I made it very clear that if we have a budgeted amount and our bids come in way past budget, we go back to the drawing board.
Yes, that's what we're doing.
Okay, so let's make our request clearer if we got somebody that, you know,
This is
was
just to
disqual-
advise you of what we're gonna try to make. The
Thank
thing
you.
about it is, this grant was CDBG, it was set forth the funding for it, at least 9 years ago. At the time, that would have been sufficient maybe, but you're talking about a good bit of time between that. We can go back to CDBG, but we have to do our due diligence. There's no guarantees that we get additional funding, but we are looking at alternates of being able to make it sufficient with the base bid and come in within budget.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Benny Johnson.
So the question is, low bidder that didn't file the proper paperwork, was he within the budget or was he over?
No, sir, it was over 300.
any one of them
It
was
was
still over the budget,
300,000,
so we need to go
everything,
back.
everyone was over, but 300,000 was a little more
More
palatable than 1,281,000.
So in the base, it sounds like we got some justification to go back to CDBG for some more money.
Right, we can do that, and there, the engineer can look at some changes. We were bare bone to start with because of how the grant was structured in the application. So we're gonna look at as many avenues we can to get the funds.
I would hate to, if we're already bare bones, I'd hate to cut it any more than what we're trying to do. And
We
wind up with
can't-
a substandard project and not be able to fund it as well.
We can't do anymore, it's got to be approved through it's got to be there for what the grant says we're gonna do.
That's right.
So you won't shave anything off and make less of the project.
Mr. Joseph.
Martha, this is the $5 million grant we have? So we have a $5 million project.
Well, actually,
It's more now, if you, based on that, what you said. but
Actually,
$6
the
million.
area construction-
So if it don't come back, we're at the option of giving the government $5 million back and not putting nothing in the ground. So, I hope we come back and we can make a reasonable decision on, hopefully, the bid come in reasonable. If it does come over, we can at least agree to still keep the project alive.
It's a $4 million was what we were, a little over 4 million was budgeted of the 5 million. So, we feel like we could possibly get something a little closer.
But
It's
as
out there, but there's no guarantees with the amount of industry and the construction out here today. Everything is going over budget.
But as
especially
you're
now.
saying, we've been having the money for 9 years.
Well, we don't have any money, it's reimbursable, but the
But, still,
allocation
right, it
has
just,
been there.
It just took us that long, once again, to get something moving, that we could have, if we'd have done it.
Well, we had
quicker.
13 projects. And the priority was set forth by the administration of how we went through obtaining and finishing up the grants. We only have 3 left. One of them is the big sewer and one of them is the housing, and we're gonna finish that one up. So, it's set forth.
All right, thank you.
Usually the last project gets the beating anyway.
Yeah.
right, yeah.
And we're pulling from any funds that we have to try and help. It won't be, 100,000s, but we're gonna look at wherever we can shave.
Thank you for the update.
You're welcome.
Move on to agenda item number 7, status of the SRF application. Mr. Dawson and
Yes, thank you.
GSA.
GSA will come up and give a status of where we're headed with the update on the SRF funding.
We have Mr. Glenn Shaheen with GSA and Associates.
Need to include some cushions in this budget, for these benches back here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, again.
Well,
This is, I'm going to give you an update on where we stand on the SRF application. As you recall, Parish was awarded $60 million in SRF funds. We've had a couple of meetings over the course of the last couple of months to talk about options and financial considerations. And in our last meeting a week or so ago, actually we've had 2 meetings over the last 2 weeks. But in our last meeting, we felt like there was an option that we probably would work better and not commit the parish to borrowing the entire $60 million initially. There's no way to spend an entire $60 million in 1 or 2 years. But we do want to preserve our funding opportunities for that $60 million. So in the, in our last meeting, what we talked about doing was to borrow, submit an application for SRF funding not to exceed $5 million. Now, why $5 million? Well, $5 million was a number that we derived at that would allow us to do a couple of things. One, it would allow the parish to address some of the deficiencies that it currently has with some of its existing wastewater treatment facilities. And we've been working with Carl and the Public Work and the Utilities Department to develop a list of what those issues are, quantifying and determining what the cost would be to address those items. We think somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 to $3 million is what it would take to address the priority items to bring those facilities into compliance, to repair aerators and various other components of those treatment plants, to put them back in an operational condition that they need to be in. The other $2 million or so would be spent on developing, vetting out the 2 or 3 other options that we might want to consider to move forward in the additional borrowing of SRF money. There were some options that we discussed, which included the modified P16 area, which is the area up in the northern end of the parish. And I didn't bring a map. I guess I could have brought a map tonight, and I didn't. Bill laughed at me because he thought my map was too small anyway. So, but that's the northern part of the parish, the 7342, and there's a component up along US 61, a portion of US 61 in the northern part of the parish. If you recall, that project we originally estimated to be is what we applied for the $60 million. It's $63.5 million, but that included some other costs that right-of-way and land acquisition costs that were factored into the project that are not eligible under the SRF program. Those are funds that would have to be paid for by the parish. So in borrowing the $60 million, when we went through the application with the finance department, there are certain obligations that the parish would have to make if we submitted an application for the entire $60 million that would make the parish have to dedicate some funds out of your general fund in order to support that application. So that was the, I guess, the compelling factor why we felt like it would not be the proper decision at this time to submit an application for the full $60 million. By submitting an application for 5, it does a couple of things. One, it gives us the funds necessary to address the parish's needs, but more importantly, it keeps the parish in line as a priority for the remaining $55 million at 0.95%. And then the last benefit that we felt in this approach would be that it would buy the parish time and make the necessary funds available to properly vet an alternative in order to establish a program that we can actually go back to SRF or DEQ and say, these are the components of the project that we want to pursue. This is how we would expect to take down the remaining $55 million. It would also provide a preliminary engineering report and an environmental information document that we could submit to DEQ. So it's a little different approach than what we originally discussed, but we felt like it had more merits than downfall. Making the wrong decision and moving forward with a project that maybe doesn't make sense, obligating some monies that the parish would have to obligate in terms of supporting that $60 million SRF program, and then not being able to spend that money over a short period of time just didn't make sense. So that was a decision, I guess the discussion that we recently had, and that was a decision or a direction that we want to recommend moving forward with.
I got a couple questions. I know we discussed this several months ago, and that's one of the things that you were tasked with, is going to try to secure the money without, we don't
Right.
have a plan to go forward with. We don't even have a consensus on a plan right now.
That's correct.
So we're going forward, trying to resecure the 60 million
Right.
and looking at what we can do right now. That's within the
correct.
boundaries of the SRF, and that's what we're talking about, getting everything into compliance and the deficiencies that we have on the equipment
That's-
we have in front of us.
And that, we,
I want to
Sorry.
ask, how does DEQ stand?
That's what I was
Based on
gonna
our
add.
relationship with DEQ and your meetings with DEQ, where do we stand right now on this?
well, we, after our meeting 2 weeks ago, it was an option that we felt had merit. But we wanted to make sure that DEQ would be supportive of that plan, number one. And number two, that DEQ would still keep us, Ascension Parish, as a priority for the remaining SRF funds. If we borrowed 5 and it's 55 million, we wanted to make sure that DEQ would still honor the $55 million at 0.95%. We met with DEQ between our first meeting and the meeting we had last Thursday, and DEQ is very receptive, and they will support that approach. You borrow not to exceed 5 million. It keeps you as a priority for the remaining 55 million at 0.95%. So we have that commitment from DEQ. They're
And
in
not
agreement
on-
with that.
Not only that, but several months back, when we went from one venture to the next, and we basically saying, hey, look, we still, this SRF is a good thing.
Yes.
Correct.
We need to put something together, but actually our relationship with securing something with DEQ at this time puts us in good merits with the sanctions, okay? And that we do have a plan, and if our plan is just a short-term plan right now, it's a plan, and it's an efficiency plan, and it has to do
Right.
with compliance, and that's what they want to see. And we've got a little bit of time to deliberate and go back. You'd mentioned that, basically targeting the P16 area. I think everybody that's up here tonight has already, even though you came without a map, everybody pretty much knows what the P16 is and what the P16 modified is. I think it's, without speaking for everybody here, I think it's still a strong contingency of this committee and the council that the area to target is that most populated area, and try to pull some of the stuff out of Bayou Manchac and get it
Right.
to the river. So if we're not gonna lose focus of the mission. So y'all tell them between the administration and you that we feel like this is a sellable item, the plan you got in front
Correct.
right now.
Yes, sir.
With the deficiency plan to bring things up to compliance, that bill of goods is good to go forward for DEQ.
Correct.
And what's our payback on this? What's our debt service?
Amortization, if you borrowed the entire 5 million,
Yeah.
275,000 a year.
270.
Okay.
Amortization.
And we know that, Councilman Johnson's very animate about it, and most conservative people are, is that our sewer business is trying to get to a break-even point, all right? And, so we're gonna throw another 250 or so at us, on our shoulders. So we gotta try to have something that's either expandable or something that's gonna really, it save us on the O&M side or be expandable. And we know the limits of the SRS on, we can't just go buy up land and stuff like
Right.
that, so.
We believe that, Mr. Chairman, we believe that this approach has more upside than downside. If we can pursue a $60 million SRF, but once again, the time to spend 60, you can't spend it in a couple of years, but you are generating interest. Once again, there's some financial obligations that the parish would have to make to support that $60 million loan in terms of coverage factors.
Right.
So this made a lot more sense. It locks us in, keeps us as a priority. It doesn't put you in a position where you are obligated to move forward on a $60 million loan. There's some considerations that we have to make before we can define exactly a plan to move forward with. We've had some discussions about the private utility guys. We've had some discussions about some of the commercial customers here. But there's still a lot of information, primarily some water consumption data that we would like to have and get from our private utility operator here in terms of developing a user structure that would be based on water consumption. We can estimate that for residentials, but it's difficult to do on a commercial side when you've got restaurants and various other large users of water, which creates a demand. And if you're going to bill based on water consumption, which we believe is the fairest way to bill sewer based on water consumption, that information would be nice to have in order to build an appropriate rate structure.
Well, look, just for what we're doing right now, and this task in front of us, I assumed y'all looked at, you and Carl and everybody, y'all looked at the needs we have, so you've probably got a comprehensive list of what we're gonna try to attack with $2 million.
Absolutely.
All right?
Yes.
Yes.
There's 5
It's done.
plants.
Right, and so,
It's done.
all right, so that would be something that we need to look at, so.
It's,
Do we need a,
I
we
don't
need a
know,
vote
I
to
don't
go
know
forward
what
to?
action, I don't know what action is necessary by the board. I mean, that's, I know that this board and the council, I think, gave the administration the authority to submit an application, but I'm not sure.
We
But that was
gave-
a $60 million
we gave them the,
application.
we gave them the authority, we wanna negotiate, okay? So I don't know that you got anything in writing from DEQ, and you're gonna need some, revenue, guarantees from the parish government, so.
That's correct.
We're not at that point yet,
Not
okay?
yet.
So
Not
you're
yet.
gonna need legislation for that. I'm just saying, what do you need out of this body right here?
I would like
moving
tonight just a recommendation or approval that we move forward with what was presented tonight, that you give us the okay to go ahead and move forward with that as Glenn presented.
Well, the chair would be looking for a recommendation for this committee to go forward to the full council
Yeah,
with approval to move forward on this phase.
I think that'll be good if we
SRF.
had that.
So move.
We got a motion.
I'll second, I got some questions. Well, I got a
We have
question
a
too,
motion
Kenny,
and a
but-
second. Motion by Mr. Oliver Joseph, second by Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson.
I'm all in favor of securing the $60 million loan, and I know we've got issues with our plants that we need to address. Last I heard, if I remember correctly, it's been a while back, we're $700,000 a year in the hole in utilities.
I think that's probably, something around that number.
So now we're talking about adding another $200-something thousand to that. What are we gonna do to overcome that? I mean, we talked about the $60 million before. We had the agreement on the entire council, we were unanimous in supporting the entire $60 million. But we didn't have the money to pay the debt service off and do the project. I'm not willing to commit to doing $60 million, knowing that that has not changed.
I think we're in agreement.
You know, the million or two, I'm fine with as far as going out and making sure that that gets us like what Glenn talked about and gets us secure with DEQ and gets us started and hangs them on, keeps us in a priority. I'm not for going after the other three to try to figure out a way to spend 60. We've got enough information in-house. We've got the ability from somewhere to bring someone in here to give us the path forward and what we need to do for sewer before we go out and spend millions of dollars again. We can get it. We've had this conversation before.
Sure.
We had a task order that we got an estimate on around 100,000 to get us to a point that would give us a path, a plan forward as an estimate to put that information together that I think we could base a sewer treatment plan on for the future. But tax this whole $5 million into that at one time, I'm not in favor of. And so what I'm looking for from the administration is, number one, a path forward. It's been 4 or 5 years since we raised rates in sewer. And I don't like going out here and holding off for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years and then try to thrust a 100, 200% increase on the public. Small bites of the apple, a couple pennies a year, whatever it may be, to start, give people time to adjust their income to make those kind of things happen and be able to afford it and get us out of this $700,000 hole we're in or at least making positive step towards that before we add a whole bunch more money into that.
Man, if I may, Mr. Chair, first, what we're doing is the additional funding. I think that this committee approved going out for an RFQ to get an engineering firm and all that to come in and begin to develop and look at all of the aspects that you, Councilman Johnson, just mentioned. I mean, that's been approved. I mean, this is going to assist in funding that particular effort, okay, and going out and doing it. And I think that that proposal or the approval of those things is probably going to come up next month, okay? There had to be some changes in the budget to make that happen. I think it's going to come up next month. So the goal was to secure the loan, to set up a method where we can actually have funding that will assist in paying for the type evaluation that will determine, you know, what projects that we need to do to move forward. On the projects that we're doing, we have a lot of I&I. We have a lot of issues with those little plants that we have now. I mean, we've always had them. I mean, those were plans that were just given to the parish because the operators left in the middle of the night. Customer base, probably not enough customers in there at this point that will make it, you know, viable. It's just a small number of people that's in there.
509.
Right.
But, okay, so I'm gonna open
Found
a can of
system.
worms. We've got existing systems. We've got developments going up near those existing systems, and we're not requiring them to upgrade and tie into those existing systems. We're allowing them to go out and develop another system, and we're contracting with a private entity to manage that. Correct?
We're not contracting with private entities.
We're
to manage it.
negotiating with them for fees for them to tie those systems in their existing private systems as opposed to tying them into our own.
That was one, and that was on Highway 73 because of the timing that we had to it was two in the parish. One is the apartment complex down Airline Highway.
Yeah.
And that was the 73 project, I think it was Hollis of Dutchtown. Okay?
And you've got a couple other subdivisions on the backside of trailer land that could have,
Yeah.
were in eye-shot distance that could have been used to tie into that system there and upgrade it and put those systems in and have that revenue stream coming in there. We're not making smart decisions.
I can
Okay.
tell you, I just had a meeting
And-
today with Jerome and with Carl. I don't know the number, but we have an accounting. We probably have, Carl, I know you can help me with this. I didn't count the number, but probably about 10 systems or something around that number that we own. The customer base are ours. We're having meetings with Roland Jackson for the building of those customers. So we have some that early on, and this was probably some of these things happened in the last administration that was the case. However, now we are not allowing any system that's built to go over to a private entity. I mean, they are ours, and Carl can tell you. But Jerome and I just met today about it. You're going to have an accounting of what even that's going to look like in the next year or so, because I asked Jerome to give me accounting of all the systems, projects that we have, and that those systems will come over to us. So we have quite a few that will be heading our way, and I can tell you there are a couple of projects that we're looking at, Mr. Johnson, that we're looking at how can we develop some type of regional systems. We have a couple of big ones that I just found out on 42. One that may have 500 houses, the other 300. So the goal is how do we deal with it? Now we all know what DEQ has said. DEQ has said that basically anything that's discharging the Bayou Manchac, unless the parish has a 5-year plan, is going to be hard-pressed to go into Manchac. So we're going to have to come up with a 5-year plan or so to even, for those projects to even become even somewhat viable. So your point's well taken. I guarantee you right now, no customers are going over to a private entity at this point. They are remaining with the parish.
Well, the sewer use ordinance reflects that, Benny, that all the new customers.
It may say that in the ordinance.
Right.
But as typical in this parish, there's ordinances we enforce to the letter of what the ordinance says, and there's other ones we kind of look around. And unfortunately, we've been looking around some of those for, in my opinion, some reasons that aren't necessarily 100% accurate. Because the user ordinance basically said that you had to, if you put in a development and you had to put in a sewer system, if you wanted to donate it to anybody, you had to donate it to the parish.
Right.
Okay?
I think
And
that's
so-
what's happening, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
no, it's
Not
not,
this one.
because that apartment complex on Airline Highway has not been required to put in a treatment system. They allowed them to go, they negotiated with a private entity to go tie that into an existing system. And so
Right.
that's, those are things we need to stop doing.
Correct.
Because even though we're sitting here saying those customers are ours, where's the revenue going? It ain't
To the
coming to the
private
parish.
customer, private owner.
And so, you know, there's a lot of things like that that
Yeah.
we're not doing things to try to make ourselves revenue neutral in this particular thing. And those are the things that we need to correct and make sure, and it doesn't matter when it happens, we need to change these things to make sure we're doing this to where when we go out for things like this,
Right.
it's making sense for us. And the other thing I'd like to see is some kind of path forward as far as revenue from the existing systems to make us more, getting out of more of that negative hole that we're in.
Well, we can bring that to this committee first because it has to be approved as a cost from council. I can say this, that Carl has been tasked with and Jerome has been tasked with, that there would be no development that would go to a private entity. In fact, at the pre-application meetings of any development, and even on the preliminary plat, am I right? Even on a preliminary plat, it has to say that that system is coming over to the parish. So you're right, Mr. Johnson, early on, that we didn't have those things that were happening, but they are happening now. Carl goes to every pre-application meeting from utilities, representing utilities, saying where these things have to go. So we have put a lot of things in place to make sure we protect our customer base, because it's our customer base.
Very good,
All right,
glad to hear it.
this is where we at. I encourage this committee and the administration, we need to work on that plan. We gotta have that plan in hand. And when you improve these other facilities, improve them to the point where we're gonna take on and go grab some other customers.
Correct.
Okay? And when that's the only way we can start crawling.
You have to
before
grow the customer base.
we gotta grow the customer base. I understand Mr. Johnson's concern, and without you saying it in the open, that was in a prior administration. Okay? Bottom line.
That's right.
I was there, he was there, he just wasn't driving the train, okay?
as-
Now, we gotta get this plan in place, okay? We
Still
saying
some
this
work
a
to be done.
$250 to $270,000 debt service? Get in the budget and fund it, all right?
We can do that.
This is not a weak, government body as far as taxes go, so.
I'd like to add one more thing, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Johnson's comment about, and the revenue, of course, is important. I mean, that's the bottom line. That's the goal. That's what we're trying to get, is to get to a system that sustains itself, that's not a drain economically on the parish, but something that supports itself and sustains itself. There are several things in the sewer use ordinance that need to be strengthened. We've talked about them, we've talked about several of them. There's some things in there that helps on a couple of different fronts, but in particular on the revenue side. And we won't talk about them tonight, we'll talk about them in a work session, like
Well, I
Donald
think
Trump
we
says,
know
you don't
'em.
wanna tell them what you're doing.
We know this isn't the first time we've talked about this, so.
Right.
Yes, Mr. Bill Dalton.
Thank you. Well, I agree with Councilman Johnson that, we're gonna have to be careful about, dedicating $3 or $4 million or $2 to $3 million for, engineering review of this. However, let me ask you a couple of questions, just clarify if you don't mind, Glenn.
Sir.
If we were to borrow $5 million, I mean, what we're saying now is up to $5 million.
Correct.
My appreciation that the first 2 years, it's an interest-only payment, so that's about less than $50,000 a year, is that?
That's correct.
So
Or
1% would be 50,000, so it's
$50,000 That's right.
somewhat less, so it's not 200 and something thousand.
Not the first
For
2
the
years.
first 2 years, it's 50,000.
Right.
Additionally, we only pay interest on the money we actually draw.
You draw
Is
down.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so, my recommendation would be that we proceed with the $5 million, up to $5 million, application, but yet they have to come back through this body to the council to make any draws. And so, we can take the 2 million once you come up with the projects and we approve that or the Utilities Committee approves it, sends it to the council, then we make a $2 million draw if we find a purpose, to prepare the plan to, my thing is address the TMDL situation
Correct.
in Manchac. And I think that's what everybody else here is too.
Two of
That's
two of
what,
the
that's
end
what
result,
we
that's what you
plan,
do.
that's what we plan on do to start with.
Two of the plants, Bill, if you remember, were Darrow and Henryville. and we just spoke about
Yeah.
Darrow and Hillaryville with the CDBG project just a few minutes ago. So, you know, there's, maybe those two plants, maybe there's a way to maybe some of the SRF money could be utilized to supplement the consolidation of Darrow Hillaryville, which takes a plant offline,
And puts another one in the river.
Yes,
then it puts it, right.
yes.
So there's several considerations we can make here relative to the overall plan for Ascension Parish. I mean, that's one consideration. We look at some sewer use ordinance issues. We think there's some ways to enhance the sewer use ordinance that would generate some additional revenue to Ascension Parish, which once again helps close that gap that we've got on the revenue side from the existing systems. All of those things, we think, Benny, goes toward the development of a long-range plan. We don't immediately leap into a huge project. We kind of crawl into it. But also, we think that by doing this, there's some other benefits, long-term benefits, that we can talk, once again, we can talk about in a working session.
Thank you, sir. Any
Thank
further
you.
questions? Any objection?
Whoa. Mr. Chairman, what is exactly the motion, and who seconded it, and what are we voting
Allow them
on?
to proceed forward with
The motion
With
was
the SRS for the
to-
$5 million,
to allow the
not to exceed
administration to
$5 million.
move
The-
forward.
The exact plan as Mr. Shaheen described, or?
No, this is to go forward for the loan,
For
to
the five,
continue
for
working
the
for
$5
$5
million,
million.
with, and he gave a summation, Mr. Dawson gave a summation that he's looking at $2 million or so for a list of deficiencies, to improve a list of deficiencies we have in current units, and another $2 million or so.
For vetting.
For vetting, yes, yeah,
So it is the original Glenn Shaheen et al. Plan.
whatever.
But they come to us.
I'm not trying to give Mr. Shaheen necessarily even the authorship, but I mean, that's what I heard from the beginning. But I thought maybe I heard from
Well,
Bill
it said
that he's
they
looking to
would add
modify.
that, rider on there, they had to come back to us for
Remaining.
any draws.
Right,
Before they made a draw.
Yes, sir.
So you're offering that as an amended motion to Benny's motion, it was seconded by? You would?
I would, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, you need a second.
Second.
I really don't see where it's amended, because that's exactly what was talked about before, but I will
It's not-
accept the
it's-
amended motion in the second.
That's what it was.
Do we have a vote?
I thought it was amended, but
Do we have
I'm
any
easy,
other discussion?
more comfortable now.
And the vote here is to move this to the full council.
Yeah, this is just a recommendation to the council.
What, can I ask this? Does that have to go to the full council? Is that,
Absolutely. I
We're
think
not
so.
tying ourselves to anything, we're just giving them the ability to go forward and
Right,
get
right.
information,
We're not-
bring it back.
don't they
We're not-
already have a
They've already got
council
something.
approval
Already
to
got it.
complete
Already
the-
got that.
Already got it.
Yeah, I don't think so.
All right.
It changed a little bit, not up to 5 million. You're okay with moving forward with that?
Yes.
I'm good. From this committee, I'm good.
Thank you.
Okay?
This committee agrees, unless we have an objection,
No objection.
to authorize y'all to move forward with negotiating that, coming back.
Not to exceed $5 million.
Not to-
Motion adjourned.
We have a motion to adjourn, second, we are adjourned.